Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Good afternoon, Venerable. I'm very happy today to bring along a guest, and he is Venerable Indasara. He's actually Venerable Professor Dr. Indasara, currently teaching postgraduate as well as undergraduate courses on philosophy at Ateneo de Manila University. Venerable Indasara is a Buddhist monk from Sri Lanka. He was formerly the Vice Chancellor of the Buddhist and Pali University in Colombo, and he has since retired at the end of last year, and since January he has been in the Philippines teaching at Ateneo de Manila University. We are very fortunate at Wisdom Park, which is the Universal Wisdom Foundation, to have invited Venerable to be our resident monk for the next few months. So Venerable will be staying there until sometime in December, and it is for us a very good privilege. And because Venerable happens to be there, and he is very interested to observe the lectures that I give, so I'm very honored and privileged and humbled to be able to invite Venerable to join us in this sharing. Okay. This afternoon's sharing is entitled The Middle Way, What the Buddha Taught. There are a lot of teachings of the Buddha which can all be summarized that in essence, the Buddha always teaches us a way that is harmonious. Harmonious means it is free from conflict of any kind. We live in a world that is very fast-paced nowadays compared to ancient times. And it's getting worse because, as you all know, the traffic gets worse, everything seems to move faster, and now we're using our mobile phones, so there's a lot more urgency. So we're living in conditions which are getting more and more stressful, and work moving faster and faster. So therefore, it is very important for us to learn how to tame our stressful conditions within. And one of the useful ways is to cultivate this thing called the middle way, so that we're able to experience contentment and composure. And with that, we will be able to connect with our inner peace and tranquility, and be able to enjoy a more harmonious and happy life. It is because of these stressful conditions around us that is really disturbing us, making us feeling discontented towards many things, dissatisfied. So all this dissatisfactoriness is really a kind of suffering. So learning how to practice the middle way is a very useful way to cultivate this peaceful mind. A lot of people look at what the Buddha taught, and one of the things they heard about is that the Buddha taught about suffering. And then people say, Buddhism is very negative, pessimistic, always talking about suffering. But actually that is not really what is happening with Buddhism. Just like in our normal daily life, if we are sick, what do? We try to take some medicine, and if that doesn't cure whatever sickness we experience, what do we do next? We go and see a doctor. When we see a doctor, the doctor diagnoses whatever is going on and prescribe to us medicine. We take that medicine and then we get better. So do we consider the doctor to be a person who brings us suffering? No. On the contrary, we think of the doctor as someone who brings us healing. The doctor is the person who has helped us heal from our sickness. In the same way, we're going through life, experiencing all the dissatisfactoriness. And therefore, what the Buddha has done, he is like the doctor. And his teachings are like medicine. And this medicine, these teachings of the Buddha will help us heal from all this dissatisfactoriness and this suffering that we continuously experience in daily life. So it's very important to think of Buddhism not in terms of talking about suffering, but really in terms of talking about healing from suffering. That's really what Buddhism is, healing from suffering. So today we're going to explore the teachings of the Buddha from a very scientific perspective. I'm going to draw in some things from science as well as some things from psychology to try to explore how our emotions are easily aroused by feelings, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, from whatever we see, hear, smell, taste or touch. So from our sense perceptions, that means everything we see, hear or smell or taste or touch, there is a kind of feeling associated with it. Either it is pleasant or unpleasant, and we begin to get emotionally aroused by these feelings. And with that, we are easily stressed and we react emotionally with lust and greed towards things that are pleasurable, with anger and hatred towards things that are unpleasant and disturbing. And we also have this delusion of self-centeredness, becoming self-centered as in everything is I, me or mine. We experience this self-centeredness every day when we drive down the road because people don't seem to give way to each other. You know, and I must say that in many countries, even in Malaysia, it's quite common to see people giving way. But here, I notice in the Philippines, it's quite a challenge. If you try to cut into a lane, people will be blocking you off. You know, that is actually just a show of self-centeredness. And it's important to learn to tame our emotions because it's this emotions that is disturbing us. Learning how to tame it is very helpful. So, and one of the ways is to practice what is called the middle way. And this will help us to experience contentment, and with that, it brings us more peace and tranquility in life. Now, it doesn't matter what religion we're talking about. All religions in the world, they are all basically looking at the same big problem since the dawn of civilization. The greatest problem to be solved by humanity in all religions is the problem of existence. When we are born, we experience birth, and then aging, and then sickness, and then death. All this brings a lot of insecurity because all this is happening in a very dynamic and impermanent way, and it is bringing a lot of insecurity to us, bringing us a lot of pain and anguish and anxiety. Therefore, we have to learn how to free ourselves from this. Now, the Buddha has actually explored these problems and went on to practice deep meditation, and from his practice of deep meditation, he finally became enlightened. So, when he became enlightened, he realized that there are a lot of things he can teach a lot of people. The reason he became enlightened is not just by simply practicing this meditation in one lifetime. He was born a prince, and then he left the life of a prince. So he left the princely life and pursued this meditation, deep meditation, to discover the truth. And from his deep meditation, he finally became enlightened, and he realized many things, and from there, he went on to teach others. So he didn't become enlightened in just one lifetime. It was over many rebirths. He had cultivated life after life. So it is said that he has cultivated what is called the 10 perfections: generosity, morality, renunciation, transcendental wisdom, unwavering diligence and vigor, forbearance and endurance, truthfulness, perseverance, goodwill, loving kindness, and universal benevolence, and equanimity and mental equilibrium. So from these 10 perfections, he has basically perfected his mind, perfected his knowledge of the world, and he's able to explain and teach. Before I go on to talk more about what he is teaching, I would like to highlight a very important point, that these 10 perfections is not something that can be cultivated easily in one lifetime. So I would like to now introduce you to my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji, and I'm going to show you a couple of clips showing his explanation of these matters. And before I do that, just a very quick background on my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji. He was born into an aristocratic family background, very wealthy, and then he went on to study. And as a young teenager, he was a very advanced meditator, very accomplished. Then he went on to study and became a medical doctor. And in his mid-30s, he decided to give it all up and became a Buddhist monk, renounced from worldly life. And since then, he went on to receive a doctorate degree in philosophy and also another doctorate degree in psychology. And I'm very blessed to have met him and become his student. So here he's going to explain, answering a question on the perfections of these arahant, people who have become enlightened. How does a person become enlightened and what have they accomplished in terms of the perfection of character? So here he is answering a question on the perfection of character of the arahant, one who is enlightened.
Does arahants achieve the perfection in goodness?
Whether the arahant can reach the state of perfection?
Yeah.
Well, the word arahant really means one who has reached perfection. So there is nothing more to be done. The Buddha is also an arahant. That's why we say, Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho. The arahang means, we have to understand this word arahang. Ara means a fetter. Fetter means a bond. Bond. That if you take a rope and tie a person, that rope is ara. Ara means the rope. Hang means to break that rope. Because we are tied to the concept of existence or being. We think, we are dreaming that we are existing. So that existence itself is the problem. Because the Buddha spoke of existence, the word that he used was bhava. Existence is bhava. And so we have to awaken from that dream of existence. So the word Buddha means one who has awakened. So, but to awaken, we have to break the bonds that we are tied to this concept of existence. So, arahant, samma sambuddho means the one who has broken the bonds and awakened from the dream of existence.
So, Venerable Punaji there was talking about these 10 bonds. That these are the things that we are experiencing continuously, and they are continuously bonding us or tying us to existence. Therefore, we continue to be reborn over and over again. And this is the principle of one of the Buddhist teachings, and that is we are reborn because we are tied down to these bonds. Some of these bonds are, for instance, personality perspective, the self-centeredness, thinking that I'm the most important thing around and everything is centered around me, I, me and mine. Then there is doubt about things that are being taught. Then they are also practicing morality based on what everybody is doing, so it's really attachment to rites and rituals and so on. So these are the 10 things, we won't go into details, but these are the 10 bonds that tie normal humans to existence. Therefore we are reborn over and over again. And an arahant is one who has become enlightened. Therefore, the arahant is a person who has broken away from these 10 bonds. Very importantly now, to go back to the root of the Buddha's teaching, if we were to look at what is the core essence of Buddhism. So there are really two aspects of Buddhism. One is the doctrine and the other is the practice. So the doctrine of Buddhism is really 4 noble truths. And the Buddha, when he first became enlightened, he knew this was so important. The first thing he did was to go out to look for the 5 friends that were together with him, 5 ascetic friends. And then he started to explain to them about the 4 noble truths. So the 4 noble truths is the core doctrine of the teachings of the Buddha. And then in the 4 noble truths, the Buddha went on to explain about the practice, which is the Eightfold Way. So the Eightfold Way is the practice of Buddhists. So 4 noble truths, the doctrines of the Buddhists, and Eightfold Way, the practice of the Buddhists. So what are the 4 noble truths? The Buddha explained that we are always experiencing suffering. So the word that is used here is from the Pali language, dukkha, which is often translated as suffering. But actually it is not suffering as in very severe suffering. It could be simple dissatisfactoriness of life. That is also a kind of suffering. So the Buddha was pointing out that we are always continuously experiencing all kinds of suffering. And there is a reason why we are experiencing this suffering. There is an origin to the suffering. There are reasons why suffering arises in us. And then the Buddha pointed out that there is good news that suffering can be ended. That is the 3rd noble truth. And finally, the 4th noble truth is that there is a way leading to the ending of suffering. And the way is the Eightfold Way or the Eightfold Path. So this is the essence of the teachings of the Buddha. The 4 noble truths as the doctrine, the Eightfold Way or Eightfold Path as the practice for Buddhists. When we look at the word dukkha, it is often translated as suffering, and that sounds very severe. But here, it is really can be referring to very simple things like dissatisfactoriness, unhappiness, discontent. This is a kind of suffering. And that can lead to stress, traffic jams, people not allowing us to cut in, and we are prevented from getting what we want. All this can be very stressful. So this stress begins with the body, but it then affects the mind. And when it affects the mind, it is called distress. So all kinds of dissatisfactoriness, stress, and distress, that is really the suffering that the Buddha was talking about. So in the first noble truth, he pointed out that there is suffering. And what he was referring to is 8 conditions of suffering. The first, there are 4 of them, is birth, aging, sickness, and death. These are the first 4 conditions of suffering. And then the Buddha went on to speak about the next 3 conditions of suffering: to be separated from what we enjoy or what we find pleasing. So separation from what is pleasing is suffering. That means sometime in our life we have experienced something which is nice, enjoyable, it makes us happy, brings us peace, brings us happiness. We like it so much, and then we no longer have it. Separation from what is pleasing. And then, are we happy when we no longer have it? Of course we are not. So that is a kind of suffering. Classic example, if you think that we can withstand losing anything, do you think you can easily lose your cell phone and not get upset? Yeah? Can you lose your cell phone and not get upset? Any person who loses a cell phone really gets very upset about it. So that is an example of separation from what is pleasing. Then the next one, number 6, is union with what is displeasing. That is suffering. And that means we have experienced something unpleasant in life, something that hurt us, something that bothered us, disturbed us, destroy our peace. Now we are stuck with it. We can't get rid of it. or we can't leave it, we can't get away from it. So union with what is displeasing is suffering. Now these two can be referring to physical objects, can be referring to circumstances, can be referring to relationships, can also be referring to people. Well, if you talk about physical objects, I've already pointed out the cell phone, losing your cell phone, so that's physical object. Or in the case of union with displeasing, if you can't afford to change your car and you're driving a very old junk, continuously breaking down, and you're stuck with that, that is also suffering, union with what is displeasing. So that is object. Circumstances can be talking about the job, right, or the place of work, the conditions you're living under, the country you're in, circumstances that led you to where you are, and they are not what you want. So that is suffering. Or we can be talking about relationships. Husband and wife don't get along. Father and son doesn't get along. Mother and daughter doesn't get along, having difficulty with each other. So that is also a kind of suffering. And we can also be talking about individuals, that if you have a dearly beloved person, now if that person leaves you, then that is suffering, right? Or that person who is your direct relative is a person whom you don't like, or his habit or his personality disturbs you, annoys you, and you can't get rid of him. You're sharing the same house. This can even be husband and wife, father and son, and so on. So this is various situations that lead to suffering. Objects, property, circumstances, relationships, or people. And number 7, the Buddha pointed out not to get what one wants. That means you have a desire for something, you wish for something. For young people, it could be academic results. Right? Students who are studying, wishing that they will get good grades, but somehow they don't get good grades. For parents, you're wishing your children will get good grades, but somehow your children didn't get the good grades. The next door neighbor's children got better grades, and then you become unhappy. So not getting what you want, so not getting what one wants. And finally, the last one, this one is a little bit technical. Trying to explain this can take a long time, so I'm going to give you the short answer. Basically, Buddha pointed out the 5 aggregates subject to clinging is suffering. In a nutshell, the 5 aggregates is, the Buddha was referring to this process within us, whereby when light enters our eyes, we're able to see something. When sound enters our ear, we're able to hear something, right? When aroma enters our nose, we're able to smell something. When flavors come into contact with our tongue, we're able to taste something. When our body comes into contact with objects, we are able to touch and feel something. So this 5 aggregates is referring to this process of perception, that we are able to perceive our environment. So when we, in this case, that means everything we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, if we begin to personalize it, cling on to it and say, oh, I like this food and I'm going to have more of it, because you cling on to that experience of that good taste, then that can lead you to suffering. So the 5 aggregates refers to our process of perception, our ability to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And if everything we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, we begin to personalize it, it is suffering. I'll give you a simple example. You wake up in the morning and then you accidentally knock your hand against the wall and it hurts. And then you start to think, oh, my hand hurts. Now, if your mind is focused on, oh, my hand is hurting, you are really hurting yourself continuously, because you're clinging on to this hurt that you have just experienced. You have just experienced a little bit of pain, but you are clinging on to it. In the same manner, then you realize that maybe you have a running nose and a small headache, and you say, oh, I'm having this headache, it's going to spoil the rest of my day. This kind of thinking is really clinging on to that experience. And if you keep thinking, oh, this headache is going to spoil the rest of my day, guess what? your prophecy has come true. Your day will be spoiled if you keep thinking like that. This is why it's very important to learn to let go whenever we experience something with our sense organs. Realize that it is something that arises and let it go. Otherwise, we cling on to it, and that is more suffering. So this is really what the Buddha meant when he says that 5 aggregates subject to clinging is suffering. So in a nutshell, it is whenever we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch anything, don't personalize it too much. Otherwise, it will lead to suffering. And then the Buddha explained, how does this come to be? Why do we suffer because of all this? Simply put, it is this reaction we have, this thing that is called craving. We react to everything we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And there are 3 types of reaction. Reaction to sensual pleasures, that means wanting more, craving for it. Reaction to non-existence, and this here, non-existence is referring to something unpleasant. You want it to stop. You don't want it anymore because it's something that is unpleasant. You want to get rid of it. Therefore, you wish for it not to exist. And then reaction to the delusion of a self-centered existence. You want to continue to exist. We always want to continue to exist. And it is very common human mentality to believe that we want to live as old as we possibly can. So we don't want to die young, we all want to live until a ripe old age. So this is clinging on to continued existence. The first one, when we experience something pleasant, then we have lust and greed towards it. And this is causing us a lot of suffering when we have lust and greed towards pleasures. Lust turns into greed. If we experience something pleasant and we want it, wanting it is lust. Now that we begin to get what we want, how often do we say, okay, that's enough, I'm not going to have more? We don't normally do that. When we get what we want, we often want more of it. So that is greed. So lust turns into greed. In the same manner, we experience something unpleasant. We don't like it. So we begin to want to avoid it. Aversion. Aversion turns into hatred. We begin by trying to avoid it. Now, if you can't avoid it and you're stuck with it, what happens? You become angry with it. And you may even hate it. So therefore, aversion turns into hatred. And finally, the third one is that we have this self-centered existence, this delusion of self-centered existence. I am the most important person in the world. Anytime anything happens, it's I, me, or mine. I want to have it my way. So there is this belief that this self is so important that it must be satisfied or gratified all the time. So we are continuously doing things to gratify the self. So this is the delusion of self-centered existence. The word that is used here in the Buddhist scripture is called tanha, the one in blue, tanha. Now my teacher actually explained the word tanha has been traditionally translated as craving, but a more accurate translation of the word tanha is emotional reaction. We react to things in an emotional manner. We react through the emotions. Feeling is emotion in this case. It's pleasant or unpleasant, we react. And it is this reaction that brings us a lot of suffering. But the Buddha pointed out there is a way out of this. There is the good news that suffering can be ended. And here the Buddha refers to the ending of suffering by a person cultivating to perfection, to becoming enlightened. So an enlightened person is one who has ended suffering within. The Arahant, the enlightened person, does not feel suffering. While he may experience bodily pain, he may experience things that he sees that may not be pleasant, but he does not feel sad or angry or anything like that. He does not react to it emotionally. So this is the ending of all this suffering, that is to become an Arahant. Right? And basically it It is about this emotional reaction, giving up and relinquishing all emotional reaction, becoming free from emotional reactions for our survival, and no longer relying on it. Because if we continue to depend on emotions to make us happy, emotional gratification keeps coming and going. When it comes, we're happy. When the gratification is gone, we are unhappy. So gratification arises and dissolves continuously. It is never there forever. So if we depend on it, it will bring us more suffering. We have to learn to be free from it and becoming an arahant, the ultimate state of perfection of one's character. Then that is to be free from all these causes of suffering. Right? And how can we be free? So the Buddha pointed out that there is a way leading to this ending, and that is the Eightfold Way. Now I won't go much into the details of the Eightfold Way, but we're just going to focus on a simple explanation of how we can help ourselves, free ourselves from the suffering by practicing the middle way. I'll just give you a quick overview of the Eightfold Way. There are 8 stages of development or cultivation. This is for our practice. That's why we say the Eightfold Way is the practice of the Buddhists. The first practice is to cultivate right view, and that is to understand the realities of life. That everything is rising and fading away. The realities of life. And to understand about the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering and the reasons for suffering. So this understanding is what is called right view. With that right view, we begin to then want to do something about it. And that wanting to do something about it leads us to this desire to free ourselves from this suffering, this desire to better ourselves, cultivate and purify our mind. So there is this right intention. So therefore the first part, the yellow part, is made of those 2 stages, cultivating right view, and that is understanding what is good for us, what is not good for us, what is helpful versus harmful, what will benefit us versus what will harm us. Okay? And then the second stage, right intention, is wanting to do something about it with our lives. So this will equip us with a basic wisdom, panya, the initial level of wisdom that can help us cultivate further. It may not directly lead us to enlightenment, but it is a starting point, a starting step. The next step is then to purify the body, and that is the part in blue. It's called sila or morality, or some call this virtuous conduct. Learning how to speak without harming anyone, learning how to act without hurting anyone, and learning how to live a virtuous life. Those 3 stages. Minding our speech, minding our action, and minding our way of living. And this is called sila, morality or virtuous conduct. Then finally, the third part in green deals with meditation. And it is collectively referred to as samadhi, which is often translated as concentration, but that concentration is not a very accurate word. We discovered yesterday at Logos Lodge. We discovered yesterday. Okay, so this green part is meditation, and it is made of 3 portions. First is to learn how to free ourselves from these emotional disturbances. And this is the practice of meditation that leads to the tranquility of the mind, peace of mind, to free ourselves from emotional disturbances. So the first goal of meditation is to cultivate a tranquil mind. And the only way to cultivate a tranquil mind is to give up these emotional disturbances. And these emotional disturbances are categorized into 5 different things, commonly called the 5 hindrances. So I won't go too deep into that because we're not talking about meditation, but basically it's about freeing ourselves from emotional disturbances. And then the next part is to cultivate mindfulness, to be aware of what's going on in the body and what's going on in the mind, so that every time we say something, we are aware of what we are doing. We become mindful of our own actions, our own speech, and then we are able to do it in a very wholesome way. It's only when you are mindful of what you say or what you do that you are able to speak and act in a wholesome way. If you are mindless about it, if you're not thinking about it and simply saying things, then you could be speaking things that may not be helpful to you or to others. Finally, the last part is this right concentration, and this is really talking about cultivating a pure mind. A mind that is so pure, it is able to see clearly insightful wisdom in the realities of life. And in a nutshell, this meditation part is made of two categories of meditation. The first category is called samatha meditation or tranquility meditation. The second part is called vipassana meditation, or what we call insight meditation, insightful wisdom. Right? So this, in a nutshell, is the Eightfold Way. And Buddhists who want to follow the teachings of the Buddha and live the life of a Buddhist, then he has to practice this in this manner. That these are the 8 stages of practices. Now, when we speak about that blue part there, the purification of the body, there are 10 things we have to avoid. Harming life, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, false speech as in untruthful speech, malicious speech as in divisive speech, causing people to fight amongst themselves, right? Getting one person angry with another, dividing people with your speech. Harsh speech as in hurtful speech, hurting someone with your words, making that person belittling a person. Gossips and rumors, spreading untruths. And then covetousness, that means desiring things, craving for things. Ill will and hatred, that is hating things, wanting to get rid of things, having bad intention towards things and people, whatever. And then wrong view and delusions, believing in things that actually are not helpful at all. So these are the 10 very common mistakes that every human makes. And the Buddha pointed out the first 3 deals with actions of the body. The next 4 deals with actions of the mouth, the speech. And the last one deals with actions of the mind, how the mind thinks or what the mind understands and thinks, relates to. So these are 10 unwholesome karmas. Meaning that if we do anything in these 10 categories, it will bring us consequences in the future. The karmas. Everything we do, every unwholesome action we take, every unwholesome speech we make, it will lead to future karma affecting us. So, when we look at all this, it's really talking about what is causing us suffering. So, going back to the second noble truth, it is our emotional reaction that is really causing us a lot of suffering. If we learn to tame our emotions, we will not have that suffering. But we react emotionally as in desiring, lustful and greedy, right? Aversion and ill will and hatred towards something we don't like, and the delusion of self-centered existence. So the important thing now is to understand how is this affecting us and what's going on. This thing called us. We're really referring to the mind, the activity of the mind. So mind is really an activity. And the Buddha has actually explained how the mind works with 3 simple words. And the way he explained it, this is very amazing. In modern day, a lot of scientists, psychologists and neuroscientists, they are beginning to try to map how the mind works. They figure out a little bit about the brain, but using the understanding, the scientific knowledge of the brain, they begin to map what is going on in the mind, right? and many psychologists in the past have done that. A few have done it quite successfully, or rather have models that appear to be making a lot of sense, like Sigmund Freud with his ego and id and superego. But the Buddha used 3 words to describe how the mind works. Because the mind is an activity. The mind is not an entity. It does not exist. The mind is an activity, and the only way we know what is an activity is to experience it. So the mind is a mental experience. It does not exist. We cannot hold it, or touch it, or see it, or feel it. We can only experience the mind. So the experience comes in 3 parts. The first part is the process of perception. When light enters the eyes or sound enters the ear, we are able to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, becoming aware of objects in our environment. So this is the first activity in the mind. So this is the consciousness towards object. They call it sense consciousness, to become aware of objects in our environment. That is the first thing that the mind does. The second thing that the mind does is called cognitive process. And this is to be able to recognize what that object is and interpret it and give meaning to it. So recognizing what an object is the process of cognition. Being able to interpret it and give meaning to it is the process of conception. Conception means creating a concept. Every time we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something, there is a concept in our mind arising about the object that we have just encountered. Right? So there is a process of cognition and the process of conception. So this is really our rational mind, our thinking mind. But the Buddha did point out there is another part of the mind called the cheetah. It's very important. Mano is the thinking mind. Cheetah is the emotional mind. It leads to the affective process, or what psychologists call the affective process. And this is really the emotional process of the mind. It leads to mood and temperament. What does it do then? Basically, it is our emotional reaction to everything we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And this reaction is because of this cheetah. Cheetah is this emotional mind that is making us react and cling on to that experience, personalizing the experience. And that is really what it does. In this process of personalizing the experience, see, every time we experience something, the mind does not observe that experience purely as an experience. The mind, having experienced something, begins to run into mental proliferation, creating stories about that experience. And that is because of our imagination, our memory, and our expectation. Every time we experience something, there is some kind of imagination associated with that experience. There is some kind of memory associated with that experience. There is some kind of expectation associated with that experience. And I call this the I-me syndrome. I, imagination. M, memory. E, expectation. The I-me syndrome. It leads us to become self-centered. Everything is about I and me. So we're very self-centered because of this. The self-centeredness arises because every time we experience something, we begin to imagine how it's going to affect me in the future. We begin to recall, what did it do to me in the past? And we begin to imagine if it is not exactly the way we want it, we want to change it. We have expectations towards it. So this is really the work of this part of the mind which the Buddha called cheetah, the emotional mind. The part of the mind which is not our normal thinking. This is the part of the mind that disturbs us, the emotional mind, because emotional thoughts arise at its own choosing. We are not able to choose emotional thoughts. They just arise and disturb us. What we can do is how to tame it after it arises. We cannot stop it from arising, right? But we can do something about it when it arises. Then we can learn how to tame it, let it go, abandon it. Or, if we don't do that, in wisdom, out of the lack of wisdom, we begin to react. So that is emotional reaction. So now listen to my teacher explain that aspect of it, called the domination of this emotional mind called cheetah.
So in the human being, the thinking part is called mano, whereas the emotional part is called cheetah. But the Buddha pointed out was, what has to be done is not to obey the cheetah. What is happening today is that the mano part, the thinking part, is doing what the cheetah wants. You see, cheetah is dominating the mind. And the mano is just catering to the cheetah. There is a verse where the Buddha says, Chittena niyati loko, chittena parikassati, chittassa ekadammassa, sabbeva vasamangvagu. What that means is, chitta is dominating the world. Chittena niyati loko. Loka is the world. Chittena niyati loko. Chittena parikassati. Chitta is disturbing everything. Chittassa ekadammassa. Chitta is that one thing. Sabbeva vasamangvagu. That everyone is spellbound by chitta. Everyone is dominated by chitta. Like being spellbound. So therefore, the only thing is to learn how to gain control over the chitta, the emotional part.
Now what my teacher said was basically, emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. Distress is mental suffering. Stress is physical suffering. So emotions create mental suffering. Emotion is that one thing to which all are spellbound. Because the Buddha used the word chitta to explain this process. So we are trapped by the way our emotions react. And if we allow it to react and allow it to take over, then we are spellbound by it. Once we become emotional, it's very hard to get out of it because we are trapped in that state of emotion. And if we don't learn to get out of it, it hurts us even more. And that's why Buddha pointed out that it is the self-affliction of mental suffering, distress. And he said that whatever harm one enemy may do to another or one hater to another, it is one's own ill-directed emotions that inflict upon oneself a greater harm. That means if somebody can say something to us to hurt us once, it is the way our emotional mind responds to that is going to determine whether we will continue to be hurt by it or not. I'll give you a very simple example. If somebody says to me, "Oh, Billy, you look so fat." Now, if somebody says that to me, it's just words. First time that person says that to me, maybe my feelings are hurt a little bit. Oh, Now, if I were to continue to remember that and say, "Oh, yesterday this person tell me I'm so fat. He must think I'm very ugly." Now, if that thought arises in my mind a second time, then I'm hurting myself one more time. Now, every time I think about what that person said to me, I'm hurting myself again and again and again. So when someone says or does something that hurts you, if you continue to allow the imagination, the memory, the expectation to flow, then you are hurting yourself over and over and over again because of just one thing somebody said to you. Right? And this is really mental proliferation. The mind running away with all kinds of stories about what has happened because of imagination, because of memory, because of expectations. IME. Imagination is thinking about the future, things that hasn't happened yet. Memory is recalling a past that has already long gone. Expectation is trying to change what is already right in front of you. Right? So my teacher went on to explain this further by pointing out what modern psychology has found in this respect.
It is very important to understand that modern psychologists have become aware of this. It was Sigmund Freud. He didn't use words like cheetah and mano, but he used words to refer to the emotional part and the thinking part. He began to understand these two things, cheetah and mano. The emotional part he called the id, I-D, id. The thinking part he called the ego. The thinking part he thought of as something that is conscious and doing thinking, whereas the emotional part is unconscious. But he also saw that even the thinking part is mostly unconsciously done. That even our thinking is to a great extent unconscious. That is why he spoke of this unconscious. And to explain the unconscious, he used the analogy of an iceberg. Yeah. He used the iceberg. It's like we put a block of ice on the water or something. It floats. So the iceberg is a huge block of ice floating in the ocean. So what he pointed out was that when that block of ice is floating in the water, a greater part of the block of ice is under the water, and only a small part is seen at the top. So in the same way, our mind, the greater part of the mind is unconscious, and only a small part is conscious. Now his problem was how to gain control over these emotions. He saw that it is very important to gain control over the emotions.
So emotions basically is that one thing that disturbs us. How do we stop it? How do we get rid of it? We can't prevent it from arising. That is the important thing to understand about emotions. When they come, they visit us. They are like visitors. We can't prevent them from arising. It's just like someone walking up to your door and knocking on your door. You can't prevent someone from arriving at your doorstep and knocking at your door. But what you can do is not to let that person in. In the same manner, when emotions are aroused, what you can do is not to allow it to disturb you. Learn to let it go. Not allow that visitor to come into your house. Not to allow the arising of the emotions to remain in your mind and disturbing you over and over again. How do we do that? It's called the middle way. The Buddha pointed out it's very important to learn and practice this middle way. And this is the practice of the Buddhists. The Buddha pointed out to stay away from two extremities, not veer towards either of these extremities. The first extremity is that we are continuously experiencing emotional arousals because of our sensual feelings. When something happens, we feel something about it. We can't avoid feeling. But what we can do is how we treat this feeling after we begin to experience it. So we feel something either pleasant or unpleasant. We can't avoid it. You taste something spicy, anghang, and then you feel it. It is very spicy. You can't prevent that. But what can you do afterwards? You can drink water, or you can try to withhold that spiciness. So in this case, when you're experiencing feelings, the first extremity the Buddha pointed out to avoid is not to indulge in the feelings, not to go in and, oh, this is so nice, I'm going to have more of this, and get involved with it, indulge in it. So first is not to veer towards the extremity of indulging in emotional urges and emotional feelings. Expression of emotional excitement by releasing this tension in action, craving for more of it and so on, or trying to fight it and getting rid of it if it is unpleasant. The other extremity, some people think that, okay, I'm going to practice refrain from emotional reaction. So what do? They bottle up their emotions. They force themselves, no, I'm not going to react. You know, when you do that, it's a lot of tension building up in your body. So it is really self-torment and self-mortification. Suppression of emotional urges by withholding all tensions. So this is again the other extremity to be avoided. So in a nutshell, the Buddha says that the first extremity to be avoided is emotional reaction to sensual feelings, and the other extremity to be avoided is forceful effort to restrain emotions. So what do? The Buddha says there is a third way. It is called the middle way. Now at this point, before I talk about the middle way, I like to point out I myself had this misunderstanding once until I was very fortunate to have met my teacher who explained to me very thoroughly. Basically, some people think, and I thought about it when I first read about it before I met my teacher, I thought, oh, the middle way means a little bit of indulgence and a little bit of restraint. That is the middle way. But that is not the middle way. Because a little bit of indulgence simply means you are already veering towards one extremity. A little bit of restraint is, again, you are veering towards the other extremity. The Buddha taught the middle way is a third way. So what is the third way? Now, when your emotions are aroused, let's say by something pleasant, and you become excited, and you feel you want more of it, what should you do? Learn conscious relaxation. And that is, allow the tensions in your body that has been aroused, the emotional arousal, allow it to subside. Otherwise, you become too excited. So learn to let go this excitement with conscious relaxation. And then bring your attention inwards, observing what this excitement is doing to your body and your mind. And this second step is introspective attention. So when you're able to bring your attention inwards, observing how this emotional arousal has affected your body and affected your mind, you begin to understand it better. And then you begin to realize that there is a way to let it go. Because by observing it as an observer and not as a participant or indulging in it, you will be able to learn to let it go. And the third step, when you're able to let it go, you will experience mental equilibrium. This is the fruit of letting go. Mental equilibrium is peace of mind. So in other words, the next time somebody says or does something to arouse your emotion, what most people do is react right away. When somebody calls me, "Oh, Billy, you're so fat," and the first thing I go do is shout back at that person, "Oh, you think you're very slim, huh? You think I look very ugly just because I'm fat, You know, that kind of reaction, you see. So the next time somebody says something like that to me, I just say, hold it, take a deep breath, relax. And then observe, what is happening to me? Oh, he just said something to me, that's all. So why am I getting excited? There's no reason to be excited. He just said something. Treat it as he has just said something, that's all. Don't give more meaning to it, and then I'm not offended, right? So bringing the attention inwards and seeing how it is affecting the body and the mind. And all these are actually, the more detailed practice are explained in the Eightfold Way. But I'm going to give you the shortcut. You don't have to learn the complete Eightfold Way to practice these 3 stages. The middle way of conscious relaxation, introspective attention, and mental equilibrium. So what is the shortcut? And here it is. Conscious relaxation. Whenever something happens that arouses your emotion, whether positively or negatively, making you excited or making you angry, do not react immediately. Consciously release the tension in your body. Because you're now excited, your body is excited. You see, our body releases hormones the moment our emotions are aroused. Because emotions come in 2 dimensions. Physiological first, followed by psychological. Means the mind gets disturbed afterwards. Physiological means the body releases hormones. We don't realize it. Throughout the day, everything we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch causes the body to release hormones. I give you an example. Some of you may have heard this before. I even say just one word and you will feel something. I say, ma'asim. Some of you may feel some sourness in your mouth, yeah? I say the word wasabi. Some of you may be feeling the tingling sensation in your nose. Or I described to you during our childhood, our teachers did not have the luxury of using whiteboard and marker pen. What did they use? They have blackboard and chalk. So when they write on the blackboard, they fill up the blackboard, they ask a student, can you come and erase the blackboard? And some students are very naughty. They have long nails. And then they scratch the blackboard and it goes, beep. How many of you are now feeling this tingling sensation in your body? You are feeling it because your body has released hormones, stress hormones. So emotional arousal begins in the body by releasing hormones, making you feel uncomfortable, and that discomfort disturbs the mind. So it begins with physiological change, stress, followed by psychological change, distress, or psychological disturbance. So learn not to react. Why? Because then you consciously release the tensions in your body, because now your body is tense. The moment your emotions are aroused, your body is tense. Heart beats faster, breathing deepens, muscles are tensed up. Learn to release the tension. Calm your mind. So this is 2-step approach here. Pausing and then relaxing. Alright, so the first part, conscious relaxation is pausing and relaxing. Remember, I'm using the word conscious, meaning you are aware and you have the intention to want to relax. That is why it's called conscious relaxation. Learn to pause and then relax. And then bring your attention inwards, introspective attention. Gently bring attention inwards and mindfully observe how the body is affected, how the mind is affected, bodily and mental activities. This process is called introspection. Introspect, or to put it simply, just think. Think in a rational way, not think in an emotional way. So basically, after your body is relaxed, you just bring your attention inwards and think. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to observe how a situation has aroused your emotion, how it disturbs you. And if you can observe that by observing it alone, you are already taking control. Observing how your mind and body is affected, you are already taking control of what is affecting you, inside you. You may not be able to stop that person from continuing to say something to you. Let's say that person is saying some very nasty words. You may not be able to stop that person from continuing to say nasty words, but you are able to prevent yourself being hurt by it by simply observing how it affects your body, how it affects your mind. And when you're able to do that, it brings you the fruits of your practice. Mental equilibrium, where your mind is now calm and still and free from these emotional arousals and excitement, and you are able to abandon these 5 things that disturb you. We call it the 5 hindrances. To better understand the 5 hindrances, actually we should talk about meditation. So maybe in my next time I visit Soliman Lodge, maybe I can start talking about the meditation aspect of these 5 hindrances. But today I will just focus on the simple shortcut practice, how we can tame emotion with conscious relaxation. Conscious relaxation is made of 2 parts there: pause and relax. Introspective attention is made of the thinking, right? So I call these the 3-step self-compassion. Self-compassion. Because whatever you are doing, you are being compassionate towards yourself. You're helping yourself to experience contentment, to experience tranquility. So 3-step self-compassion. Pause, meaning allow time for this emotional excitement and anxiety to calm down, and also your body is disturbed by these hormonal changes. Allow time for the hormonal reactions in your body to subside. Now, hormonal reactions in your body cannot subside or stop right away. It's like a spinning fan. While the fan is turning, when you switch off the fan, what happens? The fan takes a bit of time before it slows down and stops. In the same manner, when your body releases these hormones and you feel tensed and excited, even if you try to relax, it will not stop right away. It takes time for the body to become adequately relaxed and free from the disturbance of these hormones. Right? So to help this, to speed this up, to allow your body to more quickly bring itself to a state of calm and peace, is consciously do something about relaxing. And the best thing to do, take a deep breath. Take deep breaths and just relax the body. And then consciously compose the mind. Allow the mind to compose and say, okay, now let me take a look at what is going on and how can I do something about it. So pause, conscious relaxation, and then think, the last part. Pause, relax, and think. 3-step self-compassion. The think part is when your mind is adequately composed and adequately calm. You can now purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial reactions to the problem. How can you respond to this situation? It's only by relaxing you can do that, because if your body is not relaxed, your mind cannot be rationally thinking clearly. The tensions in the body disturbs the calmness and composure of the mind. So you really need to learn how to relax first. And one of the most powerful and easiest relaxation tool is breathing. We overlook it. It is the most critically overlooked relaxation tool in the world. You don't need exercise, gym, or anything like that to relax. Just breathing alone is enough. It easily relaxes the body and calms the mind. Why? Because this breathing exercise, mindful breathing exercises, increases the natural unforced oxygen intake. And this is food for your cells. It also stabilizes the heart rate and blood pressure. So conscious breathing, mindful breathing will do that. It regulates your body temperature and your blood circulation. It also restores and maintains a condition in your body, a condition of stability in your body known as homeostasis. And finally, it helps you to calm the nervous system, indicating that there is no threat, allowing you to then focus on what you're doing, bringing your attention and your awareness to the present moment. Now, at this point, I want to point out this very last thing. Bringing attention and awareness to the present moment is simply the practice of mindfulness. Now, a lot of mindfulness gurus, they are going to explain mindfulness with 100 different words. Or if you ask them to write in a nutshell what is mindfulness, they will give you a 3-page report minimum. But I can summarize mindfulness with just 2 words: attention and awareness. Where do you place your attention and what are you aware of? So if you're able to bring your attention inwards and observe the body and the mind, and then becoming aware of how the body is reacting and how the mind is reacting or disturbed by whatever is happening, then you are practicing mindfulness. You become aware and mindful of whatever is happening around you. So this is really, breathing is the most powerful relaxation tool that you have with you 24/7, anytime. You really want to relax? Take a deep breath, right? And William James, the psychologist, many years ago said the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Very simply put, there is another psychologist who has a better explanation of how we can help ourselves. Daniel Goleman, I think many of you know him. He's written quite a lot of books on emotional intelligence. Here he talks about how to handle stress, and he described 3 windows of opportunity. Daniel Goleman.
Stress isn't really so much in the things that happen in your life. It's really in how we react to them. And we can do something about those reactions. There are 3 windows of opportunity when it comes to handling the stress in our lives. The first is to do something to change things for the better. You know, whatever's the cause of the stress, if you can change it, do it. The second is in how you see it, changing the way you perceive what's happening. I once heard a wonderful line from a television preacher. It goes like this: something good is going to happen to you today. I love that line. That is so great. You don't know what it is. It's a wonderful thought because it allows the possibility that what may seem so bad at first has an upside, that there's a silver lining to that cloud, right? Now, if we can't change the things that are happening to us and we can't change how we see it, then we're left with a third opportunity, and that's handling the way our body and our mind react to these things. See, when the body is stressed, the emotional centers flood the body with stress hormones. And this makes it do things like shunt blood from the arms and the legs into the organs. It's a fight or flight response. It pumps up our blood pressure, speeds up our heartbeat. It steals energy, actually, from the immune system, it turns out, to get us ready for an emergency. It's what's called the fight or flight response. You've heard about that. Now, if that response gets triggered day after day, week after week, and month after month, over years, what happens is the biological system in our body that's most susceptible genetically, that's most reactive, is going to start to develop a stress-caused disease. If you're a cardiovascular reactor, you're going to get high blood pressure. If you react in your gut, you're going to get problems there, and so on throughout the body. That's how stress over years and years leads to disease. It speeds up the process of coming down with the disease. So constant stress, it's like getting your amygdala stuck in high gear. Continual hijacks. We need to calm down. That's where relaxation comes in.
So that's where relaxation comes in. Here, Daniel Goleman pointed out windows of opportunity. It says, by remaining calm and relaxed, we have 3 windows of opportunity to overcome stress. Number 1, do something to change our circumstances. What does that mean? That means whatever the situation or circumstances that is happening, that is affecting you, that is hurting you, change the circumstances. For example, if you're working in a job, let's say you are employed in a company, and your boss is not a good boss. He never appreciates what you do, and every time you do something right, he never says one word. The moment you do something wrong or you do something he doesn't like, he starts to scold you and abuse you. Would you want to continue to work for such a person? Of course not. So, do something to change your circumstances. What does that mean? Well, it can be an unwholesome thing. You can kill him. That is changing the circumstances, right? Or you can quit your job and find another job. Now, I had this experience years ago. I was working for a multinational company. At that time, I was a very young executive. I was about 26 years old. I was working in a very large multinational company, a Fortune 500 company. They were paying very well. They are paying almost twice as much as any other competitive company is paying. So it was such a good job that I didn't want to give up. But my boss was a terrible boss. Maybe he got promoted too fast. He's there very early in the morning, and I'm also a very early arriver. Every time I arrive, and I say to him, "Oh, good morning, sir. How are you this morning?" And you know what he says back to me? He says, "What is so good about this morning? And why do you want to know how I'm feeling this morning?" I mean, this kind of people, you're trying to be kind to him, you're trying to greet him, and he reacts like that, responds like that. And deep down inside, I want to kill you, You're just being nice. So that is the kind of boss I work for. Now, do something to change your circumstances. I don't want to change my job. I'm not going to go to jail for killing him. So what can I do? I was very smart. I got to know his boss very well. Of course, I didn't want to hurt him, but I kept looking for opportunities in other departments. It was a very big multinational company involved in many different fields. Fortunately, I managed to get a transfer to another division dealing with different products. And then I was very fortunate to have a very appreciative boss. This is what I mean. Do something to change your circumstances. Right? So Daniel Goleman says, if you can do something to change your circumstances, by all means, do it. That means if the situation is under your control and you're able to do something about it, then do it. Next, if you're not able to do that, the next fallback position, change the way you perceive your circumstances. So in other words, whatever is happening to you, don't allow it to hurt you. Find a way to live with it in a harmonious manner by changing the way you perceive it. And the way you can perceive having a boss like the one I had that time, the moment he starts to get nasty and I start to, every time I do something nice, he doesn't appreciate it. And the moment I do something he doesn't like, next minute he'll be shouting and screaming at me. Do something to change the way you perceive your circumstances. I was thinking in my mind, every time he shouts at me, I was thinking, the gorilla just escaped from the zoo. I just have that thought in my mind. Whenever he shouts at me, I imagine him to be a gorilla that has escaped from the zoo. Now, if you think like that, you're not going to get hurt. He can shout for all you care. You just think, this gorilla is shouting again. Yeah? That is changing the way you perceive your circumstances. Right? That is actually a very brilliant way of getting out of that kind of situation. Right. So now Daniel Goleman says, if you're not able to do something to change the way you perceive your circumstances, finally, do something to change the way you respond to your circumstances. So when someone is being nasty to you, and this is actually age-old wisdom, when someone is nasty to you, when you react and become nasty back, or you react in a negative way, that person will get worse. When someone is nasty to you, you know what's the best way to respond to that person? Be kind to him. You'll be amazed how kindness kills. Kindness can stop nasty people being nasty. This is the most amazing secret a lot of people don't realize. So when you have a nasty boss and there's no way out of it, be kind to your boss. Sooner or later he's going to give up. Why? Because he's thinking, when I shout at this person, when I try to belittle him, he doesn't seem to react. He doesn't get upset. And he's so nice to me. He's so nice to me, maybe I shouldn't hurt him anymore. So kindness is a more powerful weapon than arrogance or conflict. Kindness creates harmony. Anger and reaction creates conflict. Which will bring more peace? Conflict or harmony? Be kind. And this is a wonderful way to respond to a person. If you are truly kind from the bottom of your heart, you can withstand that kind of people being hurtful to you, because sooner or later they will give up. They cannot continue to hurt someone who is being kind to them. Kindness kills. Okay, so I hope you have learned some of the techniques. Now, in a nutshell, I'm just going to summarize what the Buddha taught. Now, when someone asks me, can you tell me in a nutshell, what did the Buddha teach? If I were to explain what I have explained to you, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, firstly, it's going to take me a long time. Secondly, it is not so easy for them to appreciate it or grasp it. Here at Theosophical, I'm very fortunate. All of you are open to the idea of Theosophy. All of you already have a very open mind towards all these things. So when I explain this, you are very receptive to it. I'm very fortunate. But out there, if somebody would ask me, what did the Buddha teach? And I try to explain this Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, it's going to take me forever. So here is a very wonderful thing from the Buddha where he pointed out. And in a nutshell, this is really what the Buddha taught. It says, abandon all evil ways. Enter the good life. Purify your mind. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. Now, some of you may have come across this with a slightly different translation. And that slightly different translation is called, avoid evil, do good, purify mind. Right? Some of you may have come across that in Buddhism. Avoid evil, do good, and purify mind. My teacher was very wise. He explained to me, it is not avoiding evil in that sense, or avoiding unwholesomeness. Sometimes we can't avoid it because they arise from within us. Anger arises, ill will arises, lust arises, anxiety arises. We can't avoid it. But what we can learn to do, by practicing the middle way with conscious relaxation, we can learn to abandon it, let it go. Anger arising, let it go. Anxiety arising, relax. Right? Ill will arises, let it go. So abandon evil ways, or abandon unwholesome arising. The next one, do good. But my teacher says not do good, because do good, if you think about the term do good, what does it mean? It means from time to time do a little bit of good. Now the Buddha never taught us to do good from time to time. The Buddha basically says live a good life. Not just do good, live a good life. So enter the good life. So it's not just about from time to time doing good, but enter the good life. And then purify mind. Now, a lot of people say the teachings of the Buddha, we call it the Dharma. D-H-A-R-A-M-A if you use Sanskrit, or D-H-A-M-M-A if you use Pali. Dharma. Now, that is the teachings of the Buddha, and many people say, oh, the teachings of the Buddha is the truth. Yeah, it's the truth in essence. But what the Buddha really taught, he didn't bring the truth from somewhere and passed it to you. What did the Buddha teach? The Buddha taught experiential reality. Basically, the Buddha taught of his own experience. How, as a prince, he had given up the princely life and then practiced his meditation to the state where he finally became enlightened. And he was really teaching the experiential reality. The Buddha's teaching is a reality. It's not just a truth, but a reality. And the Buddha's teaching is experiential, something to be experienced, not something to just intellectualize, to be experienced. So, abandon all evil ways simply means not harming self and not harming others. Enter the good life simply means cultivating wellness, peace, harmony, and happiness of all beings. That means we are not only living for our own sake and becoming happy by ourselves. We are also living a life where we help other people to become happy as well. Because if the people around you are happy, you will be happy. No matter how happy you are, if everybody around you is unhappy, it will affect you one way or another. So it's about cultivating wellness, peace, harmony, and happiness of all beings. And the third part, purify one's mind. It is really about the practice of meditation to purify the mind so that you become awakened, enlightened to your boundless potentials. And this boundless potential is to realize and manifest this Buddha from within us. The Buddha from within us, we bring it out. And that is how purify one's mind can do. Awakening of the human's boundless potential. And therefore there is this Eightfold way that helps us in a more detailed way. And I hope you have learned something from this sharing. I'll finish off with this last slide where the Buddha pointed out, when faced with changing vicissitudes of life. Changing vicissitudes of life means conditions around you are constantly changing. Things are rising and falling away. Everything is continuously changing. Nothing is remaining constant. And all these changes are disturbing you, affecting you. If emotions can be stilled and remain undisturbed, free from grief, cleansed of defilements, and liberated from fear, this is the supreme bliss. And this is in one of the sermons called the Mangala Sutta. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Alright, so